Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, we're going to be going over the instructions for skills session number 1, listening and exploring. Oh boy, how exciting. Skills session number 1. This is going to be so awesome. I am very pumped to go ahead and go through it with you. Now, how are you feeling? Right? Maybe you're nervous, maybe you're excited, maybe you're scared. Don't worry. All the feelings are good. Whatever you are feeling, it is perfectly fine. I'm telling you, you can totally do this. It's going to be so much fun. And the first one is very easy. Just as a reminder, what is a skill session? We've talked about this many times in the past. There's knowledge times reps equals skill. And so the skill session is what allows us to put into practice the knowledge so that way we have the reps and the experience to actually acquire the skills. Okay, so that's what a skill session is. And then on top of that, we talked about in previous trainings why skill sessions are important. Just to really quickly recap that for you so that way you can keep that in mind. Reason number 1. Knowledge without practice is meaningless. So that way, if you actually watch somebody do a backflip on a bike in the X Games, does not mean that you are going to know how to ride a bike masterfully, okay? Watching it and doing it are two completely different things. It's the same thing with coaching. You got to be able to practice it so that way you can actually get good at it. That's the first reason skill sessions are going to allow you to actually practice it. Reason number 2 is that we learn best when we actually teach. This is a scientific fact, okay? And so it's been proven over and over again. And so the skill sessions allows you to be able to practice, teach, and learn. It's the best of all worlds. And then reason number 3 is that the skill sessions allow you and give you the opportunity to experience what it feels like to be on the other side as a client and a student of an RWP. So that way you can experience on both sides what exactly it feels like. Now, having said that, what are the actual skills that we are going to be practicing inside of this skill session? Well, skill numero 1 is going to be in the skill session. One of the skills that we're going to be practicing is conscious listening. And it is one of the most important skills that a coach can have. Why is conscious listening important? Obviously, we have talked about this at length because most people never have truly been listened to, and therefore they constantly feel misunderstood. And the more you are able to listen consciously, the more your students will feel understood. And the more they feel understood, the more they feel seen, the more they feel heard, the more they will value you as their RWP coach. Okay, so question is, how do you listen consciously? Well, we had an entire training on that. And so make sure that you actually look back at that. That is going to be very important. Inside of that training, we talk about a number of things. We talk about the 5 things that good listeners do: shutting up, witnessing as an observer. We talked about engaging as a listener, creating a safe space, and embracing silence. All of those are going to be very important for you to understand. Make sure you do reference that training if you need a refresher on that, okay? Think of conscious listening is as you are witnessing your student as a third person observer, right? We talked about this, is that you don't want to get so close in listening in that you literally are riding the roller coaster of thoughts and emotions with them. You can see here there's 2 riders on this, the speaker and the listener. And you don't want to be so far away in which you are lost in your own thoughts, and then also the speaker is lost in their own thoughts as well. You want to be conscious, centered in being able to observe them and observe their thoughts and emotions. You don't want to drown with them. Again, remember, reference the conscious listening training if you need a refresher and the details for all of this. That is going to be the first skill that we go over inside of the skill session. Skill number 2. The second skill that a masterful coach is proficient in is asking questions that elicit or draw out more of the client or student's thoughts or feelings. And so once you have created the space for your client and student to feel heard and understood by using conscious listening, the next step is to get curious about their experience and ask questions that will continue to fill in details for the bigger picture, right? So we just talked about conscious listening right now, and we talked about the 5 things that good listeners do, and one of them was engaging as a listener. And how do they engage as a listener? They ask questions. And what is asking questions? That is curious exploration, okay? And so both of these skills, when we talk about conscious listening and curious exploration, we've talked about how they're both a part of the conscious listening process, and they are tied together, okay? Now, why is curious exploration important? Curious exploration, we've already talked about this in a previous training, it helps your student feel even more heard and even more understood, and gives you a clearer picture of the student's world, right? How the student sees the world. And so as you progress in learning learning how to be a masterful remote wellness practitioner and the transformation process, you are going to discover how to use your students' answers to the questions that you ask during Curious Exploration in order to coach them in a more powerful way. And so for right now, we're just going to practice asking questions, listening to those answers actively and consciously, and holding the space for our client so that way they can be in the experience with us. Beautiful. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about how do you curiously explore? How do you actually do this specific skill? Well, just like conscious listening, we actually have an entire training on that. So you want to make sure that you go and look back at that. Inside of that, we talked about the 5 things that curious explorers, that good listeners do inside of a conversation. We talked about each of those 5 things, okay? And so again, remember, you want to make sure that you reference that training if you do need a refresher on that, okay? So ultimately, those are the 2 skills that we are going to be practicing inside of this skills session. These 2 skills really are the skills that we use all the dang time as remote wellness practitioners, okay? And so you will also learn later on in upcoming modules how we use these 2 exact same skills in order to actually get new students as well. And so these skills are the foundation of how we actually make $3,600 per student as well. You're going to learn more about that later on, okay? So ultimately, until the person that you are speaking to feels understood, the truth is that nothing else can happen. And this is why this skill session number 1, is so important. But you also want to keep in the back of your mind, okay, that good listeners use multiple skills, right? We talked about the conscious listening process. And so you're going to be learning paraphrasing and verbal mirroring and matching here immediately next. But for right now, we are going to be practicing these 2 skills inside of this skills session. All right. So with that being said, without further ado, let's go ahead and actually talk about the instructions, okay? Coach Yasin, enough explaining about other stuff. Just give me the dang instructions. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that. So, instructions. First off, you want to make sure that you have properly actually gone through the how-to skill session training, because inside of that training, we talk about the logistics of how to actually do the skill sessions, right? Like how to actually comment and how to message and how to get the Zoom link and all of that kind of stuff. That's number 1, okay? Then, what you're going to do is you're going to follow those instructions inside of that training step by step in order to actually conduct this first skills session, okay? So how do we actually do that? For this skill session number 1, what we're going to do is in groups of 2, okay? So you're going to obviously partner with 1 other student. So you guys are 2 people together. Number 1, what you're going to do is that the RWP coach is going to start recording. This is very important. It's number 1. The person whose Zoom link it is will be the RWP coach, and they are going to start recording. Okay, remember, each RWP coach is going to be responsible for their own recording. Do not forget to record. I'm telling you, don't do it. It's going to be annoying for you. You're going to have to repeat this entire process. It's going to be annoying. Make sure you record. Number 1. Number 2, for this specific skill session, it's going to be setting a timer for 20 minutes, okay? So the coach, the one who is the RWP coach, they are going to set a timer for 20 minutes, whoever Zoom link it is. They're going to set a timer for 20 minutes. They can do it on their phone, do it on the computer, whatever. It doesn't matter, okay? The timer is very important. You want to be respectful for the other students' time. This is very, very, very critical, okay? Now, not all skill sessions are going to be 20 minutes. However, this one is going to be 20 minutes, okay? So you're going to set the timer for 20 minutes. And then step number 3, the student, remember, not the RWP, so there's 2. There's RWP and there's a student. The student is going to read out loud the 8 nutrition paradigm switches. And so if you remember, back in module 3, there was a training called Nutrition Why. And inside of that training, we had something that was called the 8 switches of the new nutrition paradigm. And so inside of that, we're going to have the link for you inside of the guide, okay? What the student is going to do is that the student is going to start to read these switches out loud. So we're going to go 1, unlimited number of diets. There are as many diets as there are people on the planet. No 2 people are the same. Some components of a diet might work for you, others may not work for me. And so the student is going to be reading these out loud, okay? So that's step number 3. Again, the link for that guide is going to be found inside of the guide for this specific training, or you can just go back to module 3 and pull up the guide there as well, okay? So that's step number 3. Then step number 4 is the coach while the student is reading out loud, the coach is going to be listening and curiously exploring. So the student is reading out loud, and the coach is going to consciously listen and ask questions, aka curiously explore, by jumping in and asking questions. So some sample questions is, hey, do you agree or disagree with this switch, right? Tell me more. Where have you seen this switch show up in your life? What's important to you about this nutrition paradigm switch? How might this paradigm switch apply to your work with your clients when you work with them? Anything else you'd like to share? What matters to you most about this paradigm switch, right? So these are just sample questions that the coach can use when the student is actually reading the switches out loud. The coach is going to curiously explore and listen. Remember, using the nonverbal cues, using everything that is in conscious listening and curious exploration. Okay, now, how to use these questions? You can ask any of these questions. You can engage your curiosity in order to just choose whatever questions you want to ask. If a question doesn't make sense to your student or it doesn't resonate with them, then you can say, cool, no problem. Let's try something else. Or, hey, let's go in a different direction. You can just choose another question. Also, you do not have to use these specific open-ended questions, okay? These are just there for you as a reference. You can use your curiosity to ask as many open-ended questions that come to mind in the time frame that you have, okay? So the RWP coach is to listen and observe the student's thoughts, feelings, and experience of the nutrition paradigm switches and ask these questions to curiously explore and draw out more of how the student feels about each of the switches, okay? The coach's challenge in this skill session is not to share his or her opinion while the student is talking. Instead, to be fully present, ask questions, and listen to the student's answers. Now, it's not on the sheet, but I want to go ahead and make a note. This is very important, is that as you are the student, try to actually be helpful, right? Don't just give like one-word answers to the coach's questions. Like actually expand, let your emotions and thoughts out. Literally give your thoughts about the switches in the nutrition paradigm. If you want to be controversial, go with it, right? See what the coach has to say about some of your thoughts around this, right? See how they experience. Challenge the coach a little bit, right? You don't have to be a rough student, but try to be a student who actually has some good thoughts that the coach can actually consciously listen to and curiously explore. So that is going to be step number 4, okay? Step number 5, after that, once the timer goes off, remember the 20-minute timer, once the timer goes off, the coach is going to thank the student for sharing, and you guys are going to go ahead and end that first half of the session. But remember, this is not over, because remember, this is the RWP coach, and now there's a student. Now you guys got to switch roles. And so make sure you've already gone ahead and exchanged Zoom links, and immediately right after, this is not like, hey, let's book another session. No, immediately right after, you're going to meet on the other student's Zoom link, and now the other student is going to be the RWP coach, and now they are going to go ahead and start the recording. Now they are going to go ahead and set the timer, and now they are going to go ahead and ask the questions and consciously listen, and then you are going to be the one that is actually reading out loud the nutrition switches of the paradigm, okay? And so step number 7, start again. Now that the roles are switched, the new RWP coach will set the timer again for 20 minutes, and both the RWP and student will repeat these steps. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is the step-by-step instructions on exactly how you are going to conduct skills session number 1. This is how you're going to actually practice these 2 specific skills. Now, a quick note about this as well is how to prepare to consciously listen and curiously explore, okay? Because here's one thing I want to go ahead and point out. It's very important, is that great RWPs who are also great listeners in conversation sometimes understand that it takes getting into the right mental headspace in order to properly consciously listen and curiously explore. How do they do that? 3 things. Number 1, you want to ground yourself into your surroundings, right? So when you are the coach, you want to make sure that you're grounding yourself in your chair. You're becoming observant and cognizant of where you're at, right? You want to take a deep breath, right? You want to stay grounded in yourself. Remember, you want to balance. You don't want to be too close and you don't want to be too far. You don't want to end up riding the other person's roller coaster, right? And so this is very important for you to ground yourself in where you're at, especially important for empaths. For example, myself, right? Whenever I hear somebody, whenever I hear thoughts and emotions of somebody else, I tend to get wrapped up in their thoughts and emotions. So what I do is I kind of just ground myself, so that way I'm observing, I'm conscious, I'm not lost in my own thoughts and emotions, but I'm not also riding their roller coaster, okay? So very important. Number 1, ground yourself in your surroundings as the coach. Number 2, you want to shift your focus and your energy to the student, right? You still want to be apart from them, but you want to be in observer mode. And so sometimes what I do is I sometimes like squint my eyes just a little bit, not in a mean way, but I just kind of like, it's almost like I'm looking into their soul, right? Like I'm just really, really focused and really putting all of my energy. Like you can really feel it in your bones when somebody's consciously listening to you because their energy and their attention is going towards you, right? And then number 3, as a coach, you want to go ahead and nurture that feeling of compassion and curiosity. You want to go ahead and as you're grounding yourself, you're doing this entire process, you're thinking, who is this human in front of me? How do they see the world, right? That's the question that you're asking yourself. You're being curious. You really are legitimately interested in what this person has to say and how this person thinks and how this person sees the world. And so these are 3 very, very important tips on how to actually consciously listen and curiously explore as an RWP coach. And so with that being said, as we're starting to close out this training here, I do want to go ahead and talk about a couple things. Number 1, practicing skills in isolation, okay? The goal of this skill session is to share as little about yourself as possible and learn the most about the student's thoughts and feelings about the 8 paradigm switches in the shortest time possible, okay? As you start to master these skills, if you're an excellent RWP coach, you will get very good at extracting massive amounts of thoughts and feelings from the student because you are so good at actually allowing them to feel heard in order for them to feel understood, okay? And so yes, in coaching, there will be times in which we share our own teaching and our personal stories and our own experiences. However, in order for us to practice the skill inside of the skill session, so that way we can see how this is different than a normal conversation, as opposed to a coaching conversation, we are practicing these skills in isolation so that way we can get very good at the skill by itself, okay? So the practice here is to listen and not respond in the normal ways that we are used to. And yes, it is going to feel weird, and that's okay because it's new. You're going to find yourself talking way less than you're used to and listening way more than you are used to, okay? And so for some students, they might even feel uncomfortable with this. And guess what? That's okay. You want to let it be strange for you. Why? Because remember, skill equals knowledge times reps. And so the goal here is to get as many reps as possible. We're talking about volume of reps. We're talking about more quantity. And so don't worry, you don't have to do it perfectly. The more you do it, the more normal it is going to feel, okay? You're going to find that it's extremely interesting to listen to people in this way. You can really start to get engrossed with somebody. You really start to really get focused into them, right? And as you get better at this skill, eventually you will feel that time literally just flies by because you are so in the zone. You are so interested in the person that you are listening to. Maybe not in the beginning. You might not feel it this first time, but I promise you, as you become a better coach, as you become a better listener, as you become better at curiously exploring, it really is like almost like a meditative practice, okay? And so this is how you know that you are starting to master the conscious listening process. And so that is exactly the reason why we practice these skills in isolation. So that way, ultimately, we are able to go ahead and get as many reps as possible with the knowledge that we've already gone ahead and learned. So remember, all of that knowledge that we went ahead and learned, if you got to get a refresher at it, it's amazing time to get a refresher at it. So that way you can actually practice it and get in as many reps as possible. Okay. Now, last note that I want to go ahead and point out on here, imposter syndrome. Are you struggling with imposter syndrome? Some students struggle thinking, how in the world am I going to be a remote wellness practitioner, right? I feel like I'm an imposter. But here's the thing. Everyone struggles with nervousness and feeling like a fake whenever they start something new. It's completely normal, right? The problem is when you actually label it as a problem. You take something that is completely normal, something that is a part of life, and then all of a sudden you label it, oh, this is a problem. Because here's the truth, okay? Even though we are going to be giving you everything to get your remote wellness practice launched and even pay for the $500 to $1,000 plus per month softwares for RWA students only, the thing is, you're not just going to go ahead and start jumping and getting students off the bat using the proven income process, are you? No, because of the fact that you're going through phase 1 of this program. And you can see how detailed we are going through inside of phase 1, right? You're seeing how much you are learning, the skill sessions, everything, health to coaching and everything in between. And so this is an entire process that is going to ensure that when we get to module 5 and module 6 and you start coaching students, actual students through your transformation sessions, that there's going to be no doubt in your mind that you have gone through the process, even though you might feel like you have a lot more to learn. the truth is that you are no imposter. You have gone through the process. And we're going to touch more on imposter syndrome in module 5. But for right now, I just want you to know, keep on pushing through the process. Remember, you may not be ready now, but through the process, you will become ready. Okay. So through this process, you will become somebody who doesn't struggle with imposter syndrome and can actually charge $1,200, $2,400, $3,600 plus for your transformation programs. But first, you got to make sure that you make it through the training classroom. And so ultimately about this skill session, I want you to know that you're going to do great. I know you're going to do an amazing job inside of this session. I really want to commend you for being able to be willing to try it. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is what practice is for. This is why we practice here. This is why we get all of the nerves out. We get all the stumbles out. We get everything out and we're able to do it imperfectly, right? This is why we practice. And that way, when you're out there actually working with students who are paying you, you have all of this practice under your belt, okay? And so I know you're going to absolutely crush it. Go out there and absolutely get it. Let's go ahead and talk about your action steps specifically for this training. Number 1, you want to go ahead and make sure that you watch and study this training in full. Number 2, you want to go ahead and comment your availability on the skills session number 1 student community post, right? Exactly the same way that we learned inside the how-to skills session training. You want to make sure you follow that exact training, okay? Number 3, you want to reply to another student's availability. Number 4, you want to have a DM conversation and schedule with the student. Remember, be professional. Remember the time zone differences. Number 5, you want to conduct your skills session with your partner, okay? Remember, you want to do this according to the how-to skills session training, as well as the instructions that we talked about inside of this training. You want to make sure that you record. Don't forget to record, critical, very, very important. Number 6, you want to upload your skills session to YouTube. Make sure it's listed as unlisted so that way it's not public. Make sure you follow all of the instructions in the how-to skills sessions training. And then action step number 7, you want to reply back to your comment on the skills session number 1 student community post exactly the same way that we talked about inside of the how-to skills sessions training. You want to go ahead and say, hey, here's my skills session number 1 with my tag my partner. Remember, tag with the @, put the YouTube link, and then give us your thoughts on there as well. I'm super excited for you to go through your skills session number 1. With that being said, I am super looking forward to seeing it inside of the student community, and I will catch you on the next training.